In recent months, large language models or foundation models like OpenAI's ChatGPT have become incredibly popular. However, for those of us who are not necessarily working in the field, it's not always clear how these models came to be, what their implications are for developing AI products, and what risks and considerations we should keep in mind. But perhaps more interestingly, there's also the fact that large language models are the foundation for advanced use cases like autonomous agents. We'll be exploring that in today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by sproutwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshy and our guest today is Artem Koren. Artem, you've co-founded Sembly AI back in 2019, which is at the forefront of advancing natural language understanding, paving the way for a symbiotic partnership between humans and technology. And you really are quite passionate about AI, from what I understand, and really bring your experiences as a system engineer, product manager, IT executive management consultant, and entrepreneur to create products like Sembly AI to help us use technology in ways that can help us achieve our goals. So I'm curious, given your great wealth of experience, let's put it that way, I'm curious, why create Sembly.ai, which you bill as the smartest AI team assistant?
Hi, Vinay. Great to be on your podcast. The idea behind Sembly AI was born before a lot of this AI hype that's happening today. And we started the company with my co-founder, Gil McClellan, and in 2019. And the core idea behind Sembly was the fact that even though technology was facilitating how we conduct meetings through online, through conference systems, it actually had no idea about what was discussed inside of meetings. And since my background is heavily from management consulting, as a management consultant, you spend your life in and out of meetings. So all the progress that's made in your project is typically driven from meeting conversations. And so the thought was in some sense quite simple, which is that if technology was able to understand and follow along what was happening in the meeting and what were the outcomes that were expected after the meeting, it could actually be very beneficial for the team. And that was the foundation of Sembly and onwards from there.
Terrific. And given your experiences to date, what would you say would be your personal area of strength?
So my personal area of strength, I think, is it's hard to eliminate. I think maybe it's the ability to switch across a lot of different disciplines and a lot of different kinds of environments. I think that's been the key, the ability to adapt quickly to new situations, new places, new people, new markets, new customers, and new technologies, and adapt that quickly and not spend too much time reminiscing about the plans you had before. That would, I think, hurt.
And in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know, but should?
I think something interesting that businesses don't know, but should is how the level of innovation or innovativeness in the technology that you're introducing impacts how you think about getting it out to the market. And what I mean is, there's a big body of knowledge around product management, product innovation and creation that is very customer centric and customer focused. And there's a lot of validity to that you need to be talking to your customers. You need to understand who your customer is. You need to listen to your customer as far as what they're expecting of your product. And all of that is true, except when the customer has never imagined the existence of your product. So think about the iPhone before the iPhone came out. Think about Instagram before Instagram came out. Think about social network before social network came out. All the traditional approaches to understanding customer need and customer voice and talking to customers to understand what the product should do fall flat on their face when you're talking about a segment or a product or a technology that doesn't yet exist. Because if you were to ask people, even 10, 15 years ago, let's say before TikTok was on the scene, I don't think TikTok was around 10 years ago. I could be wrong. How, if you had this thing called TikTok how would you spend your time as like an average teenager or 20-something-year-old? I doubt that the common answer would be just basically spend like many hours of every single day just staring at 1-minute videos. I don't think anybody would have said that or said something like that about Instagram, that like it would be the thing you do to make, like you would take pictures of all your food. Nobody would even think of that. Do you know what I need? I need something that I could take pictures of my food with. Nobody will ever say that to you. And yet this is where we are. This is how these products are used today. And so I think one thing that businesses don't spend a lot of time thinking about is how innovative is the thing that we're trying to achieve? And with that assessment, if it's very innovative, what are maybe some different approaches we can think about to understand how it's going to be used by the target demographic?
Now, when we talk about this idea of a AI meeting assistant, obviously looking back in time before we had similar such things available, it would probably be a transcriptionist or maybe a PA who would sit in on the meeting, take notes, and then hopefully be able to figure out what would be the actionable items or things that need a particular person's attention. Trying to put that together in terms of AI obviously requires a level of skill and understanding. Is it just about having enough of a data set or a large language model to work off in order to do similar functions, or is there more to it?
So I would start by breaking up the system into a few of its components. And I think for the purposes of this question, probably it's important to isolate the piece of the technology that hears and translates into text, and then the piece of the technology that understands the text and does something useful with it. Those are very macro ways of slicing. And then so in the first part, the tech that takes the language and converts it just into pure text has evolved and recently evolved very quickly to take advantage of neural networks and building on top of really good word predictability. So it's a little bit like I liken it to if you had someone in a business meeting that had no idea about the business, they would actually do a really poor job just straight transcribing the conversation because they wouldn't expect the words. So like I say, if you take a pizza delivery guy and you say, hey, once you get the pizza, can you stay and hang out with us and just write down what we say? If that person has no idea about like corporate discussion or whatever, their transcript is going to be pretty horrid. And the same thing happens with modern transcription engines that have a lot of elements of AI in them, in that they have to be contextually very smart, meaning that they need to understand, like in these kinds of conversations, the next word is very likely this. And they no longer even do it word by word. They'll do it phrase by phrase or even sentence by sentence. And so they're becoming good transcribers because they're a little bit experts in the kind of thing you're saying. So it's just about hearing an audio. It's also about understanding the interpretation and context of what's a typical thing that you would say in the context that is being said. So that's one part of it. There are more parts in that process in terms of punctuation, also breaking up about who said what and where the different voices were, but we'll leave that aside. Then there's the second part, which is understanding what was being said. And large language models really revolutionized how well you're able to do that and just the general approach to how you would do that. Until large language models, there had to be a lot of, I would say, like mechanical ways of doing it using AI. What do I mean by that? So today, a large language model brings with it deep contextual understanding and is able to then do some useful things with that information. But until LLMs were as powerful as they are today, they weren't really usable in their true form because they would make a lot of mistakes, they would hallucinate, and they would be like slow and expensive. So we had to come up with other ways. And there's a lot of components in the system that try to figure out, for example, where the thrust of a conversation is going, given like how much is the conversation talking about something that's going to happen in the future versus happening today versus happening in the past. Because, for example, if we're thinking about tasks that need to be done, you want the conversation to be like a future-oriented discussion. And then there's like many other pieces like that where you back yourself into in a more prescribed way into an area of discussion that's important. But you do that with AI, where AI can quickly understand patterns of text, but it's not yet so smart as the modern LLMs where it can answer questions about what it's heard. So it was a lot more about like human problem solving combined with neural network approaches that give you certain pinpoint results from conversation. So that was conversational AI until a couple of years ago. And then starting a couple of years ago, you start to have these LLMs that are really powerful. So like the first versions of GPT and even Bard and like the Bard and Elmo and all of these now historical models that start to be useful in the way that they predict the kind of the next thing that they're going to say. It's shifting very heavily towards the really powerful LLMs like GPT-4, where these LLMs they bring with them a basis of really rich understanding that now you can effectively mine and triage to arrive at specific answers.
Listen, if that's what's required to bring about a AI meeting assistant, just for those of us who are perhaps familiar with things like Otter, Brain, etc., how does this compare? Just to give us a sense of understanding of where an AI meeting assistant sits as compared to some of the levels of AI that are being introduced by some of these other products as well.
Yeah, Brain, Otter, Sembly, these are all voice AI technologies or voice AI platforms. So in that sense, they have a lot of things in common. One of the things in common is that somewhere along the line, they have to hear what you're saying and interpret it as text. And then they also have to have some kind of way of capturing what you're saying and then some kind of way of presenting it to you. And there's different levels of analysis that happens. Kind of participating at some point, either in a recording or a live discussion, transcribing, and then presenting. Those things voice AI platforms have in common. But once you get beyond that and you try to look at, okay, what makes a teammate? So one thing that's special about Sembly that makes it teammatey is how it can tag along with you as a teammate. For example, like it works with your calendar. You can invite it to different meetings that you're going to. You can even tell it to go to a meeting instead of you. And so you can say, hey, go to this meeting. I'll put in this message, say, hey guys, sorry, I had a dentist appointment, but make sure to discuss this. And Sembly will come, show your message and participate in the meeting in your stead. So the way we attend environments is very important because you basically need to be where the teams are. So that's one difference. Then because it's a team-oriented product, teams now happen in different parts of the world in different languages. And so Sembly, for that reason, had to enable multi-language support. So today, for example, Sembly supports over 30 languages. And not only that, it supports mixed language meetings because it's very typical in a multi-language environment where the team can switch back and forth between languages. That traditionally gives a lot of products hard time. So that's something that Sembly embodies as well, is that it really tries to be able to engage us on as much natural conversation, natural team interactions as possible. And then, of course, the last thing that makes it a true teammate, a true assistant is the level of analysis and the level of content that it can provide for you after the call. For example, it does meeting notes, which a lot of products do, but I think the way Sembly does it, it's very kind of productivity and work oriented. So this is not a summary of your meeting. It's a very particular kind of way to give you as notes as if you would take them by hand that you can also refer back to the meeting. Sembly understands tasks better than any other product today from a meeting. And so if you have activities, tasks, or projects that were mentioned in the meeting, we strive to provide near human PM quality of task identification during meeting. It's actually like one of the latest features that we've upgraded across the product. And it's really phenomenal because you can have these tasks automatically show up in your to-do apps, for example. And and there's no like magic words to say. You just conduct your meetings like you normally would. And then at the end of the day, you look at your to-do app and, I had these to-dos because that's something I mentioned here. Right. And finally, Sembly, and there's a feature inside Sembly called Sembly, which is effectively like a chat GPT for your meetings, where you can ask it to suggest the agenda for the next meeting or write a follow-up email. So the level of understanding of the content from the meeting is very rich. And yeah, so I think that's really like that kind of full end-to-end of a meeting assistant, which is like your participation in your conversations through calendaring and attendance, and then through the depth of the results that it can give you from those conversations.
Okay. For those of us who may be exploring a solution that can evolve and help us be more productive, a product like Sembly certainly sounds attractive. What would happen to, say, the requirement, at least in certain scenarios, to have your catalog of meeting recordings, perhaps on another platform, all housed in the one space? Do we still need to have a multiple series of repositories, be it through some of the tools that we've discussed, or is there a possibility of actually bringing everything over and housing it in one place?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because one thing and that's always been our view at Sembly, is that the transcription and the meeting notes and those types of features are just scratching the surface. And so real value is in having a digital pool of your of your team discussions, because what that allows you to create is to create this digital version of like a digital doppelganger of all your team activities. And so over time, what you're doing by introducing AI into team conversations is actually you're creating this, what we call AI enterprise awareness. And so you're building this kind of digital trail. And because AI is really good at absorbing digital things and then understanding and projecting from there really well, because it's able to deduce patterns, when you're centralizing your meeting discussion content into a single cloud, yes, it's searchable by you, of course. But what's really more exciting is that it creates this opportunity for near real-time enterprise awareness about what's going on with the team relative to other teams, relative to their goals, relative to the company's goals. And you can actually have AI start to be engaged at a wholly different level in terms of the kinds of benefit it provides the organization, well beyond just the productivity hacks of automating your meeting.
Mhm. And I'm curious, so would you say that really to maximize or fully utilize AI at an enterprise level, it really requires a bit of a mind shift to go just beyond perhaps the most obvious productivity benefits?
Absolutely. I think in general, it requires a mind shift for a lot of companies and a lot of products, because it's very similar to the advent of the internet in the 90s. A lot of businesses have to rethink about how they're doing things and why they're doing things with the advent of this new kind of tech. To me, it makes sense to think about it as a new building material, just like with airplanes. At some point you had carbon fiber, and that revolutionized the kind of plane you can build, like how far it can go, what kind of aerodynamics it can have, and the type and cost of production, because the process of producing carbon fiber is so different than doing things with metal. It's the same thing with the latest generation of generative AI and modern AI, is that it's similar to having a new material that you can do business with, that really penetrates everything from customer interaction to visual art and design to data analysis to team discussions and team activity and productivity, to really everything you can think of. Now AI really plays and changes how you think about that. And yeah, of course, it requires a big mind shift, and hopefully the leading companies are already working hard in that direction.
So I'm curious, you started off in 2019. How have you been able to grow Assembly to the kind of product that it is today, not just in technical terms, but I guess from a growth perspective?
Yeah, it was very tough initially, because it was a segment that we had to do a lot of explaining for. It wasn't something that anyone woke up in the morning and said, you know what, I need an AI teammate today. Nobody did that.
Yeah.
And so you had to really talk to people and explain, okay, there's this technology, it's available, it can do all these things for you. And once you start to use it, you'll find that it's indispensable in your meetings. There was a lot of apprehension also. So not just lack of knowledge, but also apprehension because there's legitimate security and privacy concerns around a technology like this. And so it was really an uphill battle initially. Also, the fact that we were always a larger company focus. That's our background. That's what we understand best. But with this kind of product, it turned out very important to have. And then like a lower end user layer that's very user friendly, has a very slick user experience, and the individual can get a great benefit from the product, not just the enterprise in the whole. We actually pivoted a couple of years into the product into a much more polished individual user and small team experience that was the entry point for the more enterprise experience that the product offers. And so those were the initial steps. Now, in the last year or two, things changed dramatically, especially starting about somewhere around last summer, because last summer is when we first started to notice that it wasn't us coming to the market, there was market coming to us. And it seems that last summer is when the awareness of AI products and interest outgrew the apprehension and also the quality of the results that people were expecting. So these kind of graphs intersected and then went their different ways. Last summer is my sense of when that happened. And so since then, it's been a very exciting time. We're partnered with Philips. Philips sells conference microphone devices and also personal recording devices, and they're co-branded with Sembly on the box. And so you can basically, with these devices, get kind of Sembly going right away. So that's been one very great partnership. Another partnership we have is with a company called MIGSO, which is a premier management consulting firm with head offices in France, but they have presence in different parts of Europe as well as US. And so they've also been a really helpful partner in terms of getting introduced to other companies and working with other users. But interestingly, today, most of our registrations happen organically because people just find out about us effectively through word of mouth. It's incredible. We've been picked up by a number of influencers. We actually even got picked up by OpenAI themselves and one of their early posts about useful tools that are AI centric. And since then, it's been just very organic interest in our product. And that interest has been very steady and growing over the past, I'd say maybe 6-7 months or so.
Mm-hmm. So if you could take us back to earlier in the piece when you were looking more at this large scale applications and perhaps the smaller team applications, did it require doing demos? And I'm just curious, how far did your educational piece have to go in order for someone to go, oh, I get it now. I'll give that a try.
Yeah. So before the pivot, it was interesting. Yeah, certainly we had to do demos, and the demos were always interest generating because typically it's nothing like anyone has ever seen before. There was no awareness that something like this was even remotely possible. So when we showed people how like we can attend their meeting, like silently, basically, there's nothing for them to do. We just like join, like they have a joiner in their meeting that they haven't seen before, but it's Sembly. And then after the meeting, not only is their content like readable, searchable, replayable, but also they can see an extract of issues, risk, like actions, decisions, like requirements. They can see like a really nice, what we call the glance view, which is a particular kind of summary, almost like a reverse generated agenda for the meeting with the key items in it. Also, like in the early product, we had something called custom topics where you define the topics you're interested in. And you can actually, the product will highlight for you the pieces of the meeting relevant for the topics that are important to you. So these were all like, we're talking about like 2020, 2021. And these are all like super like groundbreaking things at the time. So yeah, the demos went well. But what was interesting is that once the user got into the product to actually pilot it, what we found was that the feedback we got was it was like stepping into a Boeing cockpit because it was effectively designed as this like heavy analytics tool around like text, which we dismissed. So it was like the entire focus was all on like the AI that you could do. So there's all these buttons that do a lot of AI stuff. And then users just didn't know like when and how to use it, like where, how can they get benefit out of it. And it just was very difficult to understand. Of course, that changed in a big way once we pivoted into that more individual user experience.
And so you're at a stage where really it's a combination of both product-led growth as well as sales growth. Would that be correct?
Yep.
So, and partnerships have been key. Is there perhaps apart from the technology, is there a key driver that you would attribute to your growth over the past year?
Yeah, I think the technology is always just a factor, right? It's never the whole thing. So I think it's where and how you position that's been important for us as well. So we, for example, chose the path of we're the more serious, the more glasses wearing, like not t-shirt, but like shirt wearing AI assistant in the bunch. There's a lot of different like personalities, let's say, to assistants these days. And like we were always the more serious one, meaning that we addressed like a more serious crowd and more serious teams. And our features were about more serious productivity. And so that positioning was very consistent. And I think it appeals to like certain kinds of companies that are trying to get certain things done. So that definitely helped. The other thing was that it was important for us to get our SOC 2 certification. And so we did that. The way that, it's a technology kind of experience, but the fact that there's no binary downloads, there's nothing to download, there's nothing to install, there are no add-ons to your browser or anything like that. There's no add-ons to Zoom. Our product just works out of the gate. Like you register online just like you would for any other online product, and it works. There's nothing else to do. That was very important because when you're looking at corporate environments, any one extra step in terms of getting a permission into a tenant or putting some binaries into a thing, that's a showstopper, because then it's like months and months of reviews and scrutinization. And so being able to offer a product that has this complete turnkey experience that's completely streamlined to just work from the get-go was also very important. There's design, there's brand. I think it's a portfolio, right? It's a bouquet of a lot of the different things you do. Of course, the technology behind it is important. The product itself, of course, is important. But picking a positioning, working with partners, having some design brand consistency, all of that, like unified message, all of that plays.
And talk to us, if you could, about the future and how you see this AI meeting assistant evolving. What would it look like both in the, I guess, perhaps in the short to medium term?
Yeah. So I was joking with my team that very soon my toaster is also going to be an AI assistant, because it seems like every product is now also an assistant. So it's a busy category. It's almost like becoming like the .com of the 90s. Like now everything, like before you were making t-shirts, you were just a t-shirt company, but suddenly you're a t-shirts.com. And so like something very similar is happening with AI assistants today. I think in the short term, we're going to see, first of all, just that it's sometimes called the Cambrian period of evolution of AI, where there's just a million little tools. And so I think we're not done with that yet. I think that's going to continue for a little while longer, where you're just going to have all these individual developers or like small teams that put out an AI tool that's basically like a light wrapper around a very smart large language model. And so what I think in the near term you should expect to see is even more tools. Like they started with, there was 5 tools this week. There's 10 tools this week. We're going to get to 100, 200 tools every week consistently, new, introduced. And that's going to be more. So a lot of new things, not all necessarily useful, not all necessarily better, not all necessarily working, not all necessarily secure, privacy, protecting, all that, but definitely a lot of new. We'll expect that. I think from a technology standpoint, the really fascinating thing that's going to happen like near to medium term, let's say over the next couple of years, is we're used to technology being a ping pong type of an experience where you wanted to do something, you click something and it does something. You ask it something and it does something. So it's like very like one back and forth, where it's like you play chess with it, right? You make a move, you make a move, it makes a move. That's been like a very overgeneralization of technology in general. But I think ever since like digital products have been available, the first like Apple IIs or something like that's been the case. I think we're in the precipice of breaking that paradigm, which is scary and also very exciting. And what I mean by that is that we're very close. We're not very close. We're there, but not in a very, let's say, consistent or safe way yet, where you can tell the technology like what you want done, like a goal, but then it takes end steps to get you to that goal. Like it figures out a plan with like multiple steps, and then it farms that plan out to other little AIs that go into the plan, come back, the coordinator reviews their results, scrutinizes, like retries some, accepts others, collates, updates the plan according to what it finds. So this kind of independent AI activity, there's products out there like AutoGPT, Baby AGI, and others that are very early days of this kind of a technology. It's a new segment that hasn't existed ever before. And now it's just very early, not even beta, like early alpha. But I think a lot of the future of AI is bound up in that, where it basically a little bit unleashes the genie from the bottle, where instead of having it, okay, draw me a picture of a car, and it draws you a picture of a car. You can do that today, right? But in the future, you can be like, design me a car that's better than the Ferrari, whatever. And it will go and research what's so good about a Ferrari, research like what people love about it, research how it like under compares to its competitors, and then architect a better Ferrari for you. That's where we're going very soon. And that's really exciting.
Interesting. And with that scenario that you're painting with the Ferrari, are you suggesting that there would almost be like if I can put this in different terms, almost a manager AI, so to speak, who would dole out different tasks to his subordinates AI, which would carry out the research and develop thoughts around particular concepts, which would then be collated back to the manager who would put it together in a usable format for you and I. Would that be the thinking there?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking AI cooperation, and like the manager subordinate model is a model that we as humans like and understand, like hierarchical models of control. That's something that's very natural. But the interesting thing about AIs is that eventually they could figure out their own optimal cooperative models where we can dynamically decide like who the boss is for a particular part of the project. And it doesn't have to be this like one coordinator, because it can manage cooperation in a much more sophisticated way than, for example.
Which brings to mind something that perhaps is on the minds of some of our listeners, which is if we are to use a prompt like yours, and we work in a industry where some of these conversations and information needs to be held securely and not used as a basis for perhaps furthering language models and AI. How does it work in order to have an AI that continues to evolve and understand our business and our requirements on an ongoing basis, yet house all of what we are discussing and sharing within a secure environment, as opposed to other clients who have other bits of information and other discussions?
It really much depends on the target performance characteristic of that AI technology. If the AI is, so first of all, it's important to understand that like privacy and security is a spectrum. It's not a binary. There's everything from very basic, like the internet connection that you're talking to the AI chatbot is a secure connection, all the way out to everything that happens with some kind of AI is all contained inside a private cloud on a private network with a private data store that no one else can access. And then there's everything in between. And so in terms of privacy and security, there's trade-offs. Obviously, the super secure private cloud, it's very expensive. It's hard to maintain. It's prohibitive for continuous updates. There's a lot of drawbacks to that solution. However, it is like the most castle wall solution out there. And then so you have to understand like what your trade-offs are, like where are you able to be flexible? And are you okay with this level of, it's still private, it's still secure, but there's this scenario where, for example, like a third party will be able to see your content, but maybe it won't store it. And then you can get even a little stronger than that. You can say, okay, they'll be able to see content, but that content will be redacted. So there's like a lot of layers now in different products. There's a product called Private AI where they basically do that. They redact the information that you talk to your large language models with. And so the large language model knows like what's going on, but it doesn't know specifically who it's about, like names, companies, social security numbers, whatever. Those are all redacted out. So there's a lot of slices of that spectrum where you can decide where to drop the pin. But then the question about, okay, how do you use that information to improve and increase the AI's applicability to that business? It very much depends on what you're optimizing for. In some cases, a generic large language model that's very powerful is going to be sufficient to accomplish whatever, like whatever task that business had in mind for it. But if it's a very specialized business, like specialized terminology, maybe it's, I don't know, like very like security sensitive in some ways. And maybe it's like some kind of R&D. And so it needs the AI to follow along with what they're doing. There, I think you'd have to have a specially designed environment where AI can hear, learn, understand, and incorporate back into its data sets, information that's coming from the business in near real time. But then it would be like, let's say like a private model where it's not like publicly hosted, it's hosted inside the company and nobody else can use it other than that company. At that point, it's already an architecture problem, which kind of goes to this idea that it's not just one AI that can do everything. You really need to understand what the business case is and the architecture is, and then think about, okay, like what things you can use that are proprietary, what things that you can use that are like third-party API available. And
So to bring this perhaps to to a point where people could perhaps filter through the options. If, for example, say a large law firm that dealt with various, I don't know, IP related cases or were to use something like Sembly.ai, would they have the confidence to be able to use Sembly in their discussions, in their meetings, etc., in order not just to take notes, but to house it and ensure that it is fairly secure and not perhaps available to their competitor who also deals with similar sorts of cases?
yeah, this law firm, they're probably using data storage that comes off of some cloud.
Yep.
They're probably using an email system that's provided by some popular third party, like an Outlook or a Google, but it's all online hosted.
Yeah.
Probably making video calls over Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. All of that are digital streams that pass through private networks, like third-party network. This idea that like everything is super secure, but like is Sembly secure? That's always been like an interesting, almost like a funny thing to me, because like you have your email with Google, like you have your, right? Like you have a lot of very sensitive information touching a lot of different companies all the time. And Sembly is no different. And so there it just becomes about, is the company committed to privacy and security through both technically, procedurally, legally? And that's what and then does the company have a track record of supporting that? And so Sembly certainly does. We're SOC 2 certified. We fully support GDPR. We're hosted only on the safest infrastructure. We're fully on the Google Cloud, which gives us certain levels of guarantees in terms of privacy and security as well. And we understand how sensitive the privacy and security question is. And so we do everything that we can as a technology company so that our customers can rely on us to be assured of their privacy and security as much as they would from an email provider or an online conference call provider. So that's how we strive. Again, like there could be like more stringent requirements, and we support them. We have customers who ask for certain special things to, let's say, isolate their storage from everything else. And we even have some options for like custom tenancy where you can actually specify your storage in a separate location that only you own. So that does happen. And we will like accommodate requests that are reasonable. They usually do carry additional costs.
Good. I'm curious, with this product-led approach and sales-led approach that you currently have, how are you filtering through customer perceptions and what they want or seek from a product like yours, in order not just to satisfy their immediate needs, but to build out into the future?
Yeah, that's tough because a lot of the customers who come to us don't know what they want because they're just curious. They're just curious. They just heard about these AI tools. Everybody's buzzing about it. Every tool claims to save your life and just you never have to work. It does everything for you. We don't claim that, but some tools do. And so, of course, you get naturally curious and you want to check things out. And so, a lot of the customers we get are that they're look and seers, where they're like, okay, let us take a look and see what this is about, which is great. We love to have that level of exposure and visibility and to give some users some interesting things. But from there, I think for those customers that find a fit in their workflow with Sembly, and it could be for different reasons. It could be for like just they hate doing, we have customers who just hate doing meeting notes. This was the number one thing they use Sembly. There's customers who like love the fact that they can surge back the transcripts. Okay, great. There's customers who are more like project manager and coordinating. They love the task. So it's really like different strokes for different folks. But once they do start using, what we do is we evolve with the customer. So we try to keep a close ear to the ground. We try to talk to our customers all the time, understand what they enjoy about the product, what they're thinking the next big thing for them could be, like what they would love for this technology to do. And we try to dream together with the customer about what could happen next, because it's really an open field and it's mostly unexplored territory. And so working hand in hand with our customers to understand what the next step should be is quite important.
What does that look like? Is it conversations that you and perhaps your product managers have with conversations, or does it look different to that?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. So there are certain key customers we have. There are some of our bigger accounts, and with those, we maintain a constant conversation with them. There's usually like some kind of standing call every week or every couple of weeks, and then the product team, either myself or someone from the product team, will join those calls from time to talk about, okay, like what do you think about this thing that came out? What would you like to see? Like how is this working out for you? So those conversations happen. Then there's conversations that happen where we engage certain customers directly and we entice them with like an Amazon card, gift card, or like a Starbucks card or something like that. Hey, spend 15 minutes talking to us. Like we saw that you're a user. We'd love to give your feedback and we'll give you like a Starbucks card for it. A lot of people are up for that. And we just have a very candid discussion with the user about their experience, why they're using Sembly, what we can do better, and so on. So all of that happens. And then also inside of our product, we actually have a feedback button that we encourage users to press and to tell us what they think. And so we actually get some pretty good data points from that as well. So from our support engagements and from the feedback form directly, we see, and something that we're kicking off now, or we started kicking off a couple of weeks ago, I should say, is like more of an analytical approach to understanding the customer behavior. It's something that we haven't gotten around to doing until just now, but I think it's an important piece where we're looking at our customer pathways through the product and understand where things fall off and where things succeed, and trying to learn basically through that metadata of the customer about what they're finding most useful or what they find most engaging or least engaging across the product. So not just talking to the customer, but also just looking at how they use the product physically.
Brilliant. This has been terrific, very enlightening. Is there perhaps an area or two around this idea of AI meeting assistants and large language models that you find doesn't get much airtime or doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
I think the fact that these an assistant like Sembly can actually generate things for you, write things for you, is a very understated piece of its function. The fact that it can actually draft your emails, the fact that it can talk about, okay, what's going to be important to raise in the next meeting with this customer or the stakeholder or this team lead or whatever, that it can really guide what happens next. and also save you time in like the follow-up activity. The generative aspect, I would say broadly, of AI assistant is something I think that gets overlooked. Because you think of an assistant like a scheduler, or you think of an assistant like a summarizer. That's how we've learned to accept assistant tools. But the assistants of the day they're also like almost like a junior team member. So not just like a secretarial type of a person, but like a junior team member that can do some things that typically a human was expected to do, but it's starting to be good enough that it can do it by itself. And so I think that's worth talking much more about, because that's an area of productivity that's very strong and could really empower a team in a big way.
Artem, to wrap things up, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
That AI is changing every facet of business, and Sembly AI is the part of the business that is around how teams get their work done and what it means for a team to have meetings, like what value a meeting brings. So that's Sembly AI. But beyond that, there's every possible facet of business that you can imagine is getting transformed with AI. And it's important to not just have a pulse on it, but to be ahead of the curve on that, because there's a quote that I saw a while ago that I really liked, which was that AI will not take over the world, but a person using AI will. And I think that's very true. And you can substitute person for business. And I think that it's very critical for companies today to be thinking about how AI should be mixed into the fabric of how they conduct their business.
Good. And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
So first and foremost, our website, www.sembly.ai. That's SEMBLY.ai. You can jump on the website, learn more about the product, register for a free trial, and experience the power of modern AI for yourself. It comes with a warning. It's very addictive and you begin to rely on it very quickly. You never want to have a meeting without an AI teammate again. So they're just a heads up, but certainly go ahead and try. And then to get in touch with me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn as Artem Koren, or on Twitter as Clearly Koren.
Okay, brilliant. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Artem, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Vinay. This was fun and great talking to you.